Yo, 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 what's good? It's someone that's no one. Welcome back to another story mix. We got Deliriance today, requested from you guys. We always get tons of requests for Datora and Benadryl, but along with that, there are a handful of other Deliriants out there that we will include in this mix. So we got some pretty good stories with Delirium here. I'm sure you guys will enjoy this mix. Let me know what you guys want to see next. Make sure to like and subscribe. Without further ado, let's dive right into this. Heard about it at school, ended up in the hospital. So here it goes. I first heard about Benadryl tripping from my friends at school when I was at lunch. I heard one of my friends say, "Did you guys know you can trip on Benadryl?" I said, "There's no way you can trip on Benadryl. It's sold in stores." My friend responded, "Yeah, you can. Look it up." I thought my friend was completely trying to bullshit me and make me OD or something. So after I got home from school, I started looking into it, and I found out you actually can trip on Benadryl because it has diphenhydramine in it, and it causes delirium effects. Now that I look back at it, I definitely should have researched the drug a whole lot more and found the perfect dosage. But it's too late now. I didn't know too much about the drug or doses besides you can trip on it. I didn't look into it that much at all. So the next day, me and my dad went to Walmart to grab some groceries, but I wandered off and stole 2 packs of 24 Benadryl pills. I planned on tripping when my dad went to work, so I popped them right after he left. This is where the trip report starts. 4 p.m. I grabbed a glass of water and went to the bathroom to pop a pack of Benadryl. I ate a bowl of cereal just in case my stomach hurt from eating so many pills. This was also a mistake because it didn't hit me fast enough, so I thought it wouldn't work. So then I redosed. I'll get into that later. 5 p.m. Wasn't feeling anything at all, so I thought it wasn't going to kick in, and decided to grab the second pack of Benadryl and pop it like a dumbass. Again, I did not know the dosages at all. 6 p.m. This is when shit starts getting weird. I'm laying back in bed, chilling, then I decided to look around to see if anything was happening yet. So I started staring at my dresser. The patterns of wood in the dresser looked pretty cool because they were moving around, so I kept staring for a while. I can't remember how long, maybe 10 minutes. Then I looked at the vent above my door because my bed faces towards the door, and the vent began to shapeshift into a cinder block. I was staring at it for a while, wondering why there would be a cinder block on the ceiling. I finally snapped out of it after staring at it for a few minutes. I turned on my phone and looked back at the cinder block, and it was gone. It had turned back into a vent at this point. I was 100% sure I was tripping, so I just put my headphones on, chilled back, and watched YouTube. 7 p.m. I am still watching YouTube. I'm hearing voices, like my grandparents calling my name, so I yell, "What?" multiple times before I realize it's just a hallucination, and then I think I just look stupid now. So I just lay back down and went back to watching YouTube. A few minutes later, I looked up from my phone and see my dad appear from thin air and walk towards my dresser. Then he began staring at the wall. So I asked, "Dad, what the hell are you doing?" He didn't say a word. He just stood still, staring at the wall. I looked at my phone, looked back up, and he was gone. Vanished. Then I realized that he went to work 3 hours ago. So I knew it was a hallucination, but it was so real. 8 p.m. At this point, I blacked out and shit starts hitting the fan, so I only have splits of memories. I woke up from the blackout and I was on my couch in the living room staring at the ceiling. I kept doing it because the ceiling kept twitching and breathing. It was so cool. Then I stood up, walked in the kitchen because my grandma was in there cooking something. So I walked up to her and started handing her things in my hand that weren't really there. I have no idea what I was handing her, but I was seeing something. At this point, I noticed the geometrical patterns on the curtains and walked over to them. I was trying to peel off the patterns on the curtains because I thought they were stickers, and I really looked like a dumbass. Then I blacked out again. 9:30 to 10 p.m. This is when shit starts really hitting the fucking fan. My memory began to fade in, and I woke up from the blackout. I was sitting in a chair in the kitchen with no clothes on. I had no idea this entire time I was walking around naked, but before I blacked out, I was going to take a shower. So I guess that's when the DPH really smacked my ass. I was sitting at the kitchen table, and my dad is here. It's 9 p.m., and he just got off work. So he was at the table with me, and I was wondering what the hell was going on. Why am I naked, and why is my dad and my grandma here staring at me at the table? My dad kept asking me, what did I take, and how much of what I took. I just told him Benadryl, and I took 2 boxes. He looks at me like I'm about to fucking die. He runs in my grandparents' room, grabs their heart rate test machine, and puts the little strap around my arm. My heart is beating so fucking fast, he thinks I'm ODing or about to. My father grabs me a glass of water because I'm dehydrated. I couldn't hold the glass still at all. Then he said, "You're definitely going to the hospital now." When he found out about me tripping and talking about going to the hospital, it just made my heart race even more. Like it was about to explode. So he grabs some clothes for me and tries to help put them on me for the hospital. This time, I knew I was completely fucked. No way of getting out of this one. My father said the reason he knew I was tripping was because when he walked inside the house, I was sitting on the couch naked, with my mouth wide open, just staring blank at the ceiling. 10:30 to 11 p.m. We are on the way to the hospital. I have no memory of the ride to the hospital, but I do remember when I stepped out of the car and walked inside. We walked inside, and I saw somebody through the glass. So I waved at them and said, "Hey, what's up?" Everybody looked at me crazy. I'm pretty sure this was just my own reflection. So we walk into this little room where they're checking me in to see what's wrong with me and stuff before they start asking me weird questions to see if I'm coherent. I see a reflection in the glass on the door, and it looks like somebody is sitting next to me wearing the same pants as me. So I was going to talk to them and say, "Hey man, we're wearing the same pair of pants." But when I leaned over to say that, I saw myself and realized it was just myself in the reflection. I was pretty bummed out. So the nurses walked me into this room, and I lay down on this hospital bed. I'm chilling watching TV, and I still hear voices talking to me that aren't there. So I couldn't tell if it was nurses, or my father, or if it wasn't real. So everything that anybody said to me, I just ignored. So I didn't look stupid, even though I already do, because I'm at the hospital for popping like 50 bunnies. They began taking blood samples from me to see what the hell I was on. They put the needle in my arm, took blood, and for some reason, I thought they left the needle in my arm the whole time. So I was tripping out, asking everybody in the room, why the fuck did they just leave a needle inside my arm? Because I could physically feel the needle. Like, it was inside my vein, and every time I moved my arm, it scraped the inside of my veins, even though it wasn't in my arm. So after all this shit, we ride back home, and that's that. I really hope you guys enjoy my first trip report on diphenhydramine. I'm never touching this shit again. It just turns you into a mental institution patient. Thanks for listening. Heart. I believe my house was alive. Scopolamine combined with LSD trip report. I experienced mild delirium and believe my house was alive. I took 7 milligrams of scopolamine and combined it with 200 micrograms of LSD. The resulting experience was weird and very spiritual. I have experience with psychs and have tried various different chemicals at different doses. I know some people just like hearing the crazy things people see, so I'll just list the best ones. I saw faces on my wall, which would mumble and mutter backhanded compliments. I also saw many sneering faces within the LSD, Aztec patterns. I saw an anorexic man dancing in my garden. He also banged on my window. I saw a gnome. I don't have a gnome. Tree leaves look like green hands. I saw some birds with human faces who were arguing. A fish on TV, which I believed to be 5 times the size of a human. The frosted glass on my back door made me think everything was frozen outdoors, and typical LSD visuals, but more intense. That's to name the ones I can remember. 40 minutes after ingestion, I was watching the TV in my lounge when I see what looks to be an anorexic man dancing outside. It's dark, so I can't really see, and I just see a silhouette. He appears to be slowly dancing and is moving in a slow circle. It's very eerie and takes me a moment to realize it's just a small tree being blown around by the wind. I can definitely feel the LSD at this point, and I'm getting standard open-eye visuals, morphing, slight patterns, etc. The LSD is calming the trip down and combating the underlying sinister tone. After getting a drink, I sit back down to watch Blue Planet. I felt as if I was living the show and experiencing the whole thing firsthand. When the diver dived under icy water, I got chills down my back and felt as if I was going down with him. It was exhilarating, but also terrifying. I felt as if he was about to get grabbed and killed by a sea monster as he swam through the depths. At one point, it showed a rather intimidating fish up close, and I failed to realize it was up close and believed it was around 5 times the size of the diver. I was hooked. It was like watching the most intense horror movie of all time, and I got so immersed. I just wanted the diver to swim back up and get out of there. I believed he was in imminent danger. I believe the LSD allowed me to engage emotionally in the whole scenario, whereas the scopolamine allowed me to raise the stakes and confuse me into thinking he was in danger. At this point, I was very high and had forgotten the concept of watching TV and wasn't really sure what I was doing. I began to think my TV was just a window and was trying to figure out what was going on when I suddenly heard a bang on the window. I looked, and the anorexic man had his face pressed against it. The jump scare alone terrified me. When I looked closer, I saw there was no face, but just a gauge smudge on the window. There had definitely been a bang on the window, possibly a bird flying into it. At this point, I turned on my phone light and headed outside to have a cigarette. Yes, a real cigarette, not a phantom one, and show myself there was nothing outside. The frosted glass on my back door made me think everything outside was completely frozen, and I tried to think of a logical reason for everything being frozen. It took me forever to unlock my back door, and when I got outside, I couldn't even light the cig. The body load was like being very drunk, and I stumbled a lot. I projected my phone's light upwards, and all the tree leaves were green hands, and they were all sheltering me. It was very wholesome and psychedelic. I never felt closer to nature. Thinking back, it's a little creepy, but I enjoyed it at the time. Actually, thinking back, the whole trip was a little creepy. I looked up at my roof to see some birds with human faces, and they had twisted expressions. They were arguing about something, and I thought they represented bitterness. I proceeded to designate an emotion to every part of my garden before heading back inside. My trees were wiseness, rosebush was deception, etc. On my way back in, I thought I would look at my gnome to see if he would come alive, but he didn't to my disappointment. He just grinned back at me. I don't even have a gnome. I must have stood in my garden for at least 30 minutes, just awestruck by how intricate nature is. The visuals at this point were overwhelming, with plants growing up taller and swaying side to side. It was typical LSD visuals, but on steroids. Walking back through my hallway, faces in the wall began to all make backhanded compliments. I'm convinced that all my house is alive at this point. I'm experiencing ego death, and I'm trying to decide which room in the house likes me most so I can go lie down in it. I decided to my bedroom after a questionably long debate in my head. I just sit back and enjoy the trip at this point. I'm exhausted and begin to realize how crazy the whole trip was, and I also began to realize how high I was. I slowly began to wind down, and I saw several small cats, which I don't own, roaming my bedroom, and a few more insane hallucinations. The next day, I felt I was in a dream and took it easy with a day to myself. The trip taught me a lot about myself and was incredibly spiritual. At times, it was terrifying. I missed a lot out of this post, but at times, it was also incredibly euphoric and fun. If I could do it again, I would use less scopolamine and definitely do it in daylight. I can't believe scopolamine is over the counter. It's really wild.
Being chased by the man with red eyes. This trip was the first time I ever had a bad time with DPH. The other two times, 700 milligrams and 725 milligrams, were a little weird, but I wasn't really having a terrible time. Bumping it up was when it all went very wrong. Here's my trip report on DPH. The minutes are mostly an estimate. Start. I didn't experience too much other than a minor heavy feeling in my chest, though I must note that this time around The heavy feeling was a little worse than when I did it before, kind of like a weird squeezing on my heart. I didn't think too much of it, mostly keeping my focus on the TV and talking with my friend that was next to me. He was on 700 milligrams of DPH, which I wish we had someone sober with us, but oh well. 10 minutes in. Around this time, the euphoria started to kick in. I had a mild tingly feeling in my legs, and everything kinda seemed funnier. My friend and I were watching Caroline, and were cracking jokes with each other, laughing and having a good time. Still no auditory or visual hallucinations. 15 minutes in. My whole body felt light and fuzzy, though when I moved, it was as if gravity was pushing down slightly. It wasn't much, but was a bit harder to move. The euphoria had gotten a bit more extreme, but it was as if nothing had changed. 30 minutes in. As I tried to stand up to get water, it was incredibly difficult. It seemed as if weight had gone full force at me. When I tried to walk, I would stumble a little bit and feel as if I was fighting through jello. I would also have random ringing in my ears that were pretty loud and almost painful. After drinking some water, I noticed that the dry mouth was not going away. I drank more and more, but the dryness almost seemed stuck. For some reason, it made me a little panicked, not really sure why. As I got back to the couch, I could hear a constant buzzing, but I am pretty sure it was the TV, but I can't be so sure. 45 minutes in. This is where it all starts to kick in. I look around at the walls to see thin rainbow stripes all throughout the walls. This is the point where I have random moments of confusion, asking my friend if he sees them, then remembering that he probably can't. As I stare more closely at the wall, I notice little spiral patterns forming all throughout all surfaces. I suddenly look up and see the white walls turn a blinding pink. I turn to my friend and try to speak, but it's a little hard to speak. I was eventually able to say, "Look at the walls." He turns to me and then turns to the wall. I'm not sure what he saw, but he was seeing stuff too. 1 hour in. My friend looks to me and says, "No, I feel it. I can't do this. I'm going to bed." In a panicked look. I had a feeling that he was seeing some stuff he didn't like and decided he wanted to back out, but I was determined to enjoy this experience, so I continued on. I wanted to get more water, so I got up and stumbled to the kitchen. At this point, it feels as if gravity was my worst enemy, pushing down on me with all of its force. The euphoria I had felt before was intense, and felt like my blood was boiling, but not with heat. I grabbed my water, and as I tried to walk back, I suddenly had a second where my leg went shorter than the other, as if I had no-clipped through the ground slightly. I looked around and at the ground and saw lots of spots gathering over the ground and area around me. I looked around in a daze, feeling like I was somewhere new even though I knew I was in my house. I checked up on my friend one last time and decided to look at my computer. 1 hour 10 minutes in. I was talking to some friends on Discord and something strange was happening. They would say something normally, but my brain would tell me they said something completely different. I don't remember much of the conversations we had, but I do know that most of what was said was them saying something, and then me saying something that had nothing to do with the conversation. I felt like I was answering correctly, but they would just end up going silent and say, "What?" I ended up going silent due to me not being able to answer correctly. It was also at this point where I could hear lots of voices. Voices of my mom saying, "Go to bed," or my dad saying my name in an angry tone. Every time I would hear it, I would turn around to see no one there. 1 hour 25 minutes in. I walked to the kitchen to get some water, when suddenly I looked out the window to see a pale man with short black hair and piercing red eyes looking at me. I quickly turned away and looked down at my floor to see a big black spider crawling below my feet. I jumped up, dropping my cup to the floor. As I looked around the kitchen, the voices were getting more and more intense, whispering and random people talking to me. I was convinced that I was being chased by this man with red eyes. I ran to my room and locked the door. 1 hour 30 minutes in. I was trying to call someone but kept forgetting who. I would look at my phone, remember, and then just forget again. As I was looking around, I could see faces in the wall, with weird insects crawling up them. I was also hearing a knock at my door, and was convinced a man with red eyes was going to kill me. I looked at my phone, and the screen would randomly become red, and for some reason, I thought the man was trying to get to my phone. I threw it off my bed, and just stared at my ceiling. 2 hours in. I was basically an anxious mess at this point. I felt sick to my stomach, there were sharp pains in my head, and everything that moved slightly would make me jump with fear. I couldn't take it anymore, and closed my eyes to go to bed. It wasn't long before I fell asleep. This trip wasn't the most interesting, but it was for sure scary. I honestly think there was more, but I honestly couldn't remember. For instance, I woke up and apparently I made a tweet that made no sense whatsoever, and I also wrote something on a piece of paper. It was a scribble, so I couldn't read it, but still very interesting.
Tripping sack on 10 milligrams tonight. Just as the title says, benztropine is a medicine used for essential tremors, in my case at least, as well as a few other things. It has both dopamine reuptake inhibition properties and anticholinergic properties. Half of those of atropine by milligram. It's basically a euphoric deliriant as opposed to a dysphoric one. Unfortunately, due to my body temperature increasing, 10 milligrams is about the most I can safely take. I will describe my experience here. Taken 30 minutes ago at 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. 1 hour in, 10:30 Eastern Standard Time. I feel light. Music is starting to sound better. Mild closed eye visuals. Also, I just feel warm and fuzzy. But that's the dopamine reuptake inhibition, not the anticholinergic effects. 1 hour, 30 minutes in, 11 Eastern Standard Time. The walls are sorta ripping now, and the color fuck Pattersons are appearing. Here's the translation for that. The walls are sorta breathing now, and the colorful patterns are appearing. My room is menacing as fuck on this, and at night. 4 hours in, Eastern Standard Time, AM. Psst, absolutely. Fucking wasted, but having Adam's good time. Here's the translation for that. 4 hours in, 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. Absolutely fucking wasted, but having amounts of good time. Spiders on my wall. This was lots of fun. I was able to experience hallucinations without the amnesia and fucked upness of DPH. The typing was sort of more like drunk typing rather than delirium typing. I could hold a thought together, and I knew I was high. Definitely try this if you can. It's prescription, only for tremors, Parkinson's, or side effects of medicines. But it's worth it if you can find it.
Bugs all around me. I left my boxing lesson that night to go home, and midway home, I thought to myself that I'll probably be bored and I should experiment with Benadryl. I have done it in the past at 400 milligrams, and that was a very interesting trip, so I decided to add an extra 150 milligrams. I head to my local Rite Aid and buy the Benadryl. I am not sure if the lady knew what I was up to, but she just went on with her business. I get home and dose myself a few hours later. Start. I dose myself with 550 milligrams of diphenhydramine and resume talking to a friend on Discord. 30 minutes in. I do not really feel anything major at this time, but I am starting to feel a bit weird. It's like my hands feel very lightweight and they shorten in length. I remember feeling this on my first trip at 400 milligrams, so I know I was coming up. 1 hour in. Hallucinations are starting to form at this point. The corners of my room became darker, and some objects would become larger if I stare at them for some time. 1 hour 20 minutes in. The hallucinations have kicked up a notch, and the drifting is more profound now. I also start to see inanimate objects become autonomous. I have a marble spider hanging off my ceiling, and it would start to move like it was alive. 2 hours in. Shadow people are becoming more apparent. Tall ones. They're about 8 feet tall. They do not look hostile. They seem to not be aware that I exist. 2 hours 20 minutes in. At this point, I am hearing my mother and her friend chatting loudly downstairs when my mom is sleeping, and it's about 1 to 2 a.m. It sounds so real though. I even heard one of them coming upstairs. I also start to see tiny spiders on my arm if I stare at it. 2 hours 45 minutes in. I stare at my right forearm and I start to see my fist looks like a toy that's been disconnected from my wrist. Then I saw a large red bug crawl on me, looked like a mix of a cockroach and a ladybug. I start to see papers on the floor move on their own and slightly hover in the air whilst vibrating intensely. 3 hours in. I start to see spiders on my curtains, small ones, the same color as my curtains. After a while, they start to crawl and some launch onto me. The spiders only occur when the room is dark. When I look at myself in the mirror, I start to see thorns growing out of me and my eyes start bleeding. I look completely deformed in the mirror. Music sounds amazing. It just has this extra emotion to it and it sounds faster due to the drowsiness. 3 hours 45 minutes in. A clusterfuck of spiders on my curtains now. One giant one the size of my palm and hundreds of small ones, crawling over my curtains and some launching at me. They go away as I turn my mini lamp on. 4 hours in. I saw a ghostly figure of a firefighter. With a blocky right arm walk through my door and towards me, disappearing once it got close. I also see hands behind me in my peripheral. A toy dinosaur. My brother starts to move its head and tail. It looks so real. 4 hours, 30 minutes in. I am overwhelmed and I decide to go to sleep, and the restless leg syndrome is the worst. I also seem to have a very weird internal hallucination. It's like I'm in a park and I can fly. However, the people around me seem very real and I have full-on conversations with them, and I open my eyes and realize I hallucinated an entire park filled with families. I thought I was actually there. 5 hours in. Saw an old female at my door. She had a smile on her face, a lovely one, and started to change the position of the light switch all over the wall. I also noticed my door opening on its own and would close once I blink. Meanwhile, when it is open, I would see a shadow person with glowing eyes that aren't so bright, moving around the hallway. I do not remember the rest, but the hallucinations seem so real. I eventually fall asleep and wake up feeling like shit.
Nightmare flipping. Let me just start by saying that I love Deliriants, and this is what made me try out this infamous nightmare flipping combination of MDMA and diphenhydramine. As there are pretty much no records of people combining these two, I was unsure of how much MDMA to take, so I started low with a bomb of 100 milligrams taken at the same time with 700 milligrams of DPH. About an hour in, I started feeling antisocial and the slight impending doom feeling. That meant the DPH started to kick in, but I felt no sign of MDMA. I decided to quickly make another bomb while I could. I took 50 milligrams more of MDMA with orange juice. Tends to potentiate MDMA apparently. Then hid away my stash and patiently waited. Sometime later I started hallucinating, but the DPH impending doom and anxiety has disappeared. This must be the MDMA's doing. Anyway, the rest of the trip was just me deliriously tripping balls, talking to myself, and trying to pee every 10 minutes. I don't normally hallucinate lots from 700 milligrams because of my high tolerance, but the MDMA seemed to have made the hallucinations a lot more frequent. Would recommend this to anyone that enjoys deliriant trips, and now that I know the combination didn't kill me, I can confirm it's safe. Recommended 150 milligrams of MDMA because any less tends to be overpowered by DPH. Enjoyed the spiders.
Two lives. Okay, This incident was the first and last time I tried Datora. 9:30. I successfully found the plant and plucked about 5 mature leaves and 2 of the spiky fruits. At about 9:45, I started brewing some tea with all the leaves and seeds. 10. I brewed the tea strong until it was dark black. I drank about half a mug, and that was it. 10:30. It hit me. Hard. Every time I stood up, it felt like an intense force of gravity was pulling me down. I was forced to sit back down. After this, I only remember specific bits and pieces. I lost complete track of time, and I was tripping and hallucinating intensely. I found myself falling in and out of reality and dreams. It felt as though I was living 2 lives. One incident happened where I got out of bed in my dream state and opened the bathroom door only to see my dad behind the sink adjusting some pipes. The thing is, my dad had left around 9 a.m. in the morning for work. Then I found myself going to the bathroom again in a semi-dream state, and I saw the bathroom flooding. I had done this without realizing what was happening. In another incident, I was smoking imaginary cigarettes, and when I awoke, I found myself holding a pack. I don't see how this happened. This is all I remember. It was as if I had gone through 2 days of my life in the span of 10 hours. I remember I was really stupid and acting weird for about 2 days after my trip. Note that during my trip, I would walk around semi-conscious, feeling as if I was awake, but still asleep in reality. I have to admit, though, that I felt very powerful for some reason, and I liked it. I remember hearing myself talk to people who weren't there. For instance, a good friend of mine, A, was standing by my bathroom, and I said, "What's up?" and waved to her. She waved back, but she was actually in Germany at that point in time. This is the strangest incident I remember. I got up out of bed and asked my dad if he wanted a drink. I go down to the kitchen, grab and bring up 2 beers, and sit down on my chair in my room. I repeatedly tell my dad to take his drink when I saw him walking around, but he couldn't reply. Again, my dad had left at 9 a.m. in the morning. This was so strange. I actually laugh now when I think about it. Though I'm not personally eager to try Datora again, I have to say I underestimated its power. I now respect the drug, and one day I may give it another go, but with my friends and a sitter. A word of advice: if anyone is thinking of trying Datora, please go slow. Have a little and see how you feel. If you feel you need more, gradually increase the dosage. Always, always have a sitter. I know if I had, I wouldn't have done such stupid shit. I feel quite embarrassed now when I think of what I did. Anyways, go enjoy Datora, the holy drug. I consider this because it really changed me in a way I can't describe. It was mental. Since I planned on doing this on an empty stomach, I hadn't eaten for about 5 hours prior to all of this. I have a prescription for Sominex, which is just like Benadryl. One of my mates told me he tripped bollocks off that stuff. He told me a bit about his experience, and it really intrigued me since. At this point, I've never taken a hallucinogenic. I've smoked weed twice before whilst chilling with Alex, and he said on his farm, not too far away, there's a field where shrooms spring. In the UK, shroom season is September to November, so that was far away because it was only March. So one of my friends, George, came over who was sober, and I took 8 Sominex that were left in the jar, our 450 milligrams DPH. It was pretty crazy. I saw a guy in the window. I told George to look, and nobody was there. It was hard to walk, and everything was quiet, subtle, and sharp. I hallucinated my cat in the room with me, saw a flying pencil, heard my granddad call me, but he was on holiday in Scotland at the time, and I heard footsteps, especially when I closed my eyes. I didn't see any spiders, surprisingly. Alex said he saw tire-sized ones in his kitchen, and every report I read involves spiders, but this story takes place loads later on October 16th, 2019, Saturday. So at this point, I've tripped on 2 grams of dried shrooms and smoked a 2.5 gram blunt before, and I tried DXM twice. In Wales, it's very hard to get DXM. There's only two medicines that contain pure dextromethorphan, and that's Benylin, dry coughs, and Robitussin. By the way, there's only one kind of Robitussin. It contains sorbate solution, which later on makes my stomach feel unsettling, but it's still quite safe. They are both over the counter and pretty expensive, so I only did 375 milligrams the first time and 450 the second. I had around 100 milligrams of DMT that I got from the school druggie from around a week ago. I knew he had DMT before, but I didn't know what DMT was, and I didn't know when I wanted to consume it. But for the DPH, I had gone 17 days without any sleep aid, so I had 17 Somnix, extra strength, 850 milligrams DPH. I wanted to join the 700 club, but I ended up eating all the pills. I had some DXM on me too. About 5 minutes later, I chugged the Benylin and the Robo, adding up to 600 milligrams of DXM. I don't get why people say the syrup tastes awful. It barely bothers me. I knew this was going to be a lot more intense. During the come up, I took a few hits of CBD from my vape. After about half an hour in, I feel euphoric and I completely forgot that I needed to buy a gallon of milk and some butter for my grandparents when they were out. So I walk down to Tesco and buy them, along with a cheeky Red Bull, and as soon as I leave Tesco, the DXM hits me like a bus. I instantly lose all sense of balance and need to lean back against the wall to stay upright as I walk back up the hill to my grandparents' house. I feel the loss of motor control and felt like a camera. When I stopped, my legs would ache, which is usual for DPH. As I got in, I go to bed. The next half hour or so, I feel very comfortable. In the come up, I didn't have any closed eye visuals yet, and I was regretting taking so much DPH. I was fucking starving, but the idea of eating kept making me feel like I'd get nauseated. The hunger beat me in the end. I walk down to the kitchen and have some beans on toast, along with that Red Bull. I'm not sure if the caffeine made the come up any faster. When I finish, I go to my room to text some of my friends. I read some the next day that were in complete gibberish, like, I would yes cap send, and did you listen to term mos? As I was texting, I can hear them talk from behind me, but I didn't just hear them. I could hear footsteps from outside my door, and I opened it twice. No one was there. I decided to put on some music to ignore it. Music sounds amazing on DXM and DPH to some degree. I closed my eyes for some of the songs and had some visuals of baguettes being tossed and turning into more baguettes, as well as some red and green dots flying around it. When I opened my eyes, I remembered I have the DMT in my drawer. It was then when I heard my front door knock and I looked out the window to see if it was a hallucination or not, and no, it wasn't. I told Alex I was going to take some DPH and DXM, but I did it early. I saw a shadow figure for about a tenth of a second standing right close to me, and he just disappeared. It legit jump scared me. After letting in Alex, I told him about the drugs I took about 2 hours ago. He offered me some weed, but I declined. The next half hour was just blank, and all I remember is walking upstairs, feeling unreal, and there were 3 of my mates in my room passing my pipe around, including Alex. As I said, I don't remember the half hour beforehand. They were taking hits of the DMT, or at least I thought. I didn't remember if I told them or not, and I was convinced they were real. I will now talk about my DMT trip. It wasn't a breakthrough. My memory in this part is really cloudy. My hallucination of friends were laughing a lot of the time, so I was thinking salvia. I knew DMT and salvia both produced out-of-body effects that lasted for a similar amount of time, but I didn't know what I was going to see in this hyperspace. I took 2 proper hits. As I was inhaling and holding, it got heavier and time slowed down to the point where I felt as if the DMT had just overkilled the DXM and DPH, and it would just be like any other experience. My snow-covered vision was dimming down, and as I stared through the window, everything went. I was launched out of the Dextraverse into hyperspace. After a short period of pitch black, these bright neon images started flashing in front of me, and I can hear what sounded like the Joker laughing. I hadn't even seen the film at this point. I just associated it with that. I saw these shapes for a while, and I sadly don't remember much else apart from falling through a telescope into a dark gray mist before waking up. My friends weren't there anymore. As I looked around, everything was curling and coiling, and I had no idea of the drugs in my system. I probably would have been able to remember quicker, having me not taken the DXM. As I gained the strength to move, I saw a black figure lurking behind my bedpost, and as I jumped back, I blinked and it was gone. I couldn't really see it that well because my vision at this point was just a blurry mess. I remember waking up on the kitchen floor at 6 a.m. the next day, and for days I wondered why I was there. But yesterday, I remembered walking downstairs for no reason, just because I could and was having auditory hallucinations of that Joker. Yeah, it was mental. I was crying slash laughing at the horror slash beauty of this throughout the trip. There were waves of intense conflicting emotion like I've never felt before, but apart from that, there really wasn't much I learned from the trip. But you could learn loads from something like DMT, psilocybin, or just from yourself. I know I took it with two other substances, but I honestly don't think there's much value in these for me. Even my 2 gram mushroom trip, I connected with the inner world and now have a deeper understanding of love from the trip, but I didn't learn anything about me. So, in my case, I reckon I only need one tool, and that's my mind to further develop myself, but for you, it could be different, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. I will still continue to smoke weed and do DXM when I can, but apart from that, I'm signing off.
A night of discomfort. I've tried seeds a few times, but for me, even 200 did barely anything. Don't ever do this amount for your first time. Everybody is different, and while 200 did nothing for me, it can kill somebody else, especially if it ends up being a very potent batch. Always start low and work your way up. Eventually, I came to the conclusion that 400 seeds would be my trip dose, and for some retarded reason, I decided to do it with 150 milligrams of DXM. I took every single seed and cut it in half with a knife because I thought that would make the drug digest better. The process took at least an hour, and eventually I mixed it in with some yogurt and ate it after downing the cough syrup. The first effect I noticed was my heart rate started being very fast all of a sudden, like worryingly fast. I actually said a prayer: God, if I took too much, please make me throw up. And I shit you not, about a minute after saying that, I actually vomited. I believe in God, by the way. Back to the story. I don't really remember at any point that I started tripping. Everything seemed completely normal, but I felt so terrible that I decided to just go to bed and abort the trip. Well, if only it was that easy. I could not fall asleep for shit. I had a horrible dry mouth and complete loss of motivation. I could not even be bothered to listen to music, even if my MP3 player was right next to me. Funnily enough, I was hearing music playing anyway. I was wondering why it was so quiet. Then I realized that there was no music playing. I was hallucinating it in my head. I think I was hearing music I was listening to earlier in the day. Then I remember having conversations with people, but whenever I tried asking them something, they wouldn't reply. And then I realized there was nobody there. Instead of finding this trippy or amusing, it actually pissed me off for some reason. I thought I was stupid for talking to myself. Another extremely uncomfortable side effect I had was that I felt like I needed to piss all the time, and as soon as I relieved my bladder, I felt like I needed to piss again. This was by far the least enjoyable part of the trip. By the way, I still didn't think I was tripping. The tour is different to DPH because on DPH, you actually get trippy visuals as well as occasional hallucinations. With Datora, there was nothing trippy about it, just full blown true hallucinations that you have no idea if they're there or not. There was one hallucination that was obviously fake. It was a massive wasp that appeared near my face. It was about the size of my head. However, I didn't find it scary at all and actually just said to it, "Who are you trying to scare?" And it vanished. I'm not sure if there were any other hallucinations. I wasn't looking for them, as I was lying in a dark room, not giving a fuck about seeing shit. I just wanted to go back to being sober and feeling comfort again. There was no comfort whatsoever. The dry mouth and constantly feeling the need to urinate completely overrides any cool hallucinations that you may or may not encounter. Overall, I was lucky that the trip only lasted for around 8 to 12 hours instead of 3 days, like some people get. If I didn't throw up during the come up, things could have been much worse. I have never tried to tour again after this experience, but I'm glad I tried it. And I was lucky that God decided to watch over me because He could have just let me die because of my stupidity or taking such a high dose of seeds and mixing it with DXM. Me telling you not to do this drug is probably not going to stop you if you're as stubborn as me. So if you do want to try it, please try and be as safe as possible. God bless.
Hide the knives. I'm an experienced tripper. In fact, my first drug experience was peyote. I'm not a heavy user by any means, 2 to 3 times a year. I'm a fairly regular pot smoker, and though I don't drink a lot, I'm an avid lover of beer. Hallucinogens are my love, though, and I don't consider them just recreational. For the most part, they are done camping with friends, up of Michigan. That is the place. Tripping is supposed to be a spiritual experience that can be fun, but mainly, I consider it a reboot of my system. That being said, Datura is now officially off the list of camping supplies. I did my homework, I read about the bad experiences, and thought to myself, I'll do this smart. One thing I noticed about the bad experiences was they usually involve people who regularly use drugs and lead unhealthy lifestyles. I don't. Also, people usually seem to be in an urban environment where police presence can be summoned. That was being avoided. I also made sure I had plenty of water. I was not going to smoke any pot or drink. The dose I was using was considerably lower than most of the bad story doses. I didn't officially have any sitters, but my friends were all with me. They were using mushrooms, not Datura. I've tripped with them all before and trusted their abilities to separate reality from mythology if things got too hairy. My mistake was having read a great deal of Robert E. Howard the week prior. Conan, Cole, Bronmock Marn, etc. After ingestion, I didn't get the drunk feeling as bad as most people seem to do. I was in fairly good shape. I did start getting the effects quickly. The dark woods provided a lot of shapes that outrightly became pigs. I surprised and probably scared my friends half to death when I suddenly took up the camp machete and went to a glorious battle with the attacking savages. Of this, I have little recollection. I had been lucid for quite some time, but near dusk, the battle began. This is what my friend described. You went from talking about pygmy tribes and the Yeti into, "They're here!" You jumped up from your log, grabbed the machete, ran through the fire, and into the tree line, hacking everything in sight. We were too scared to come to you. In fact, we were worried that you were going to start thinking we were orcs too, so we left. My friends literally fled into the woods to get away from me. I don't remember much until I came across a dead animal, which could have been a whale, or a unicorn, or a megatherium, for all I knew. I spent a lot of time fighting pinks, or danes, or whatever. I read a lot of fantasy books and played magic cards, so goblins, morgos, viashinos, skullbears, trolls, gnomes, and a whole other assorted menagerie of evil was out to get me. Somehow, I wandered into a swamp and lost my sword. My friends found me hours later. It wasn't hard. I left a trail of hacked brush and was screaming quite loudly. I have vivid memories of terrible things coming out of the dark for me. The scary thing was, for the several hours I was alone, I didn't drink anything. Luckily, I was only a half-mile from camp. I didn't recognize my two friends when they came for me. I thought the flashlights were witch balls. I fought with them a little before I realized they were real and had water. I'm sure that I had pissed myself and was real glad to get dry clothes on back at camp. I was in and out of lucid dreams the whole night. I basically ruined their buzz, but being true friends, they found me more amusing than asshole-horrific. I still get dogged about that weekend, but I've been forgiven. However, in addition to the 4-day hangover, I cannot shake the uneasy fear that I could have killed somebody or myself. I was literally delusional running around with a dangerous weapon in the woods. I could have fell on it. I shudder every time I think of that weekend. Given a choice between doing the tour again or eating an entire sheet of acid, I would eat the sheet. Datura is not something to be fucked with, and I'm a healthy, sane person with hallucinogenic experience. My advice? You probably are not strong enough for it, and if you are, you better not have a violent bone in your body or you can flip out easily. Have sober sitters that will absolutely not permit you to be anywhere near dangerous places or objects. Or just don't do it, because the hangover sucks and it really isn't all that fun.
A bad decision. Hi, I'm Eric, and I've had the worst nightmare experience of my life on diphenhydramine. It was a Monday night at 1 a.m. I was out of weed, and I was searching for a way I can get high. In the past, I've done Benadryl, so I decided let's just give it another try. I popped 24 pills at once, and I went and sat in my bed and just stared, watching sports. After about an hour, I tried to get up out of my bed, but I couldn't. It paralyzed me from the neck down. I was stuck and couldn't move. I began to feel my heart pinching and beating so fast, I thought I was going to die. I finally was able to stand up, and that's when the hallucinations began. I was pacing around my house, and by this time, it was 2:30 a.m. The walls started to look like they were melting, and when I would pick up my phone, I couldn't see a single thing on it. I felt delusional at this point. About 30 minutes went by, and I began to see these flies and these spiders crawling out of my shutters in my room. I tried to reach and grab one, but they would disappear, and at this point, I was terrified and kinda just wanted it to end. But no, it got worse. The spiders and flies began to multiply, and they were crawling all over my bed and my arms. I thought the whole time they were real, so I started scratching at my arms, but they wouldn't go away. And soon, I began to think this was all permanent. After another 30 minutes, it was 4 a.m. My door was cracked open, and my room is downstairs, so the kitchen is right outside. I looked out my door from my bed, and I saw this shadow with these yellow eyes. He was crouched at the corner of my counter, and I wanted to know what this shadow was, so I got up and walked to my kitchen. As I got closer, he disappeared, and I ran back to my room, shut my door, and got back in bed. It scared the piss out of me. When I laid down, I heard tapping at my door, and I probably got up 50 times to open my door, thinking someone was there. The hallucinations just got worse, and there were shadow people all in my backyard, looking out my window, standing on top of my pool, just there on the water. I closed all my shutters and just began to feel horrible heart pains. I'm a person that likes to hunt and fish. I have these deer mounts in my room, and I began to really concentrate on them. I noticed it was like they came to life. It looked like they were breathing, and they just started turning their heads. Both my mounts were just staring at me, and their eyes would blink and change colors. I just got under my covers and prayed it would all end. I had my mounts staring at me, and shadow people in my backyard staring at me, and they wouldn't move. Some would get close to the window, and some were watching in the distance. As the night progressed, I felt these hallucinations start to go away and lessen, but I was still seeing those melting effects. Even my jewel I was hitting looked like it was a huge thing of slime melting away out of my hands. Even at 7 a.m., I had no sleep and my heart was in pain. That morning, I decided to pop charcoal pills and chug apple cider vinegar to get this all out of me. For about 3 hours, I couldn't leave my bathroom and was throwing up the whole time. I did feel better after, but my heart hurt so bad that I ran to the emergency room in the front of my neighborhood, and I explained to them that my heart felt like someone was stabbing me and was skipping beats. I was in so much pain. I was hunched over majority of the day, but the doctors took my blood pressure and did a heart test, and my levels were way high. They prescribed me medication to help my pain. The rest of the day and days after, I felt these pains in my chest. It took about a week for them to finally go away. But this was my last Benadryl trip I will ever take in my life. It scared me enough to just stay away and just stick to LSD or smoking weed. I just want to let people know that this is not something I would recommend anyone trying. It is a walking and living horror movie nightmare.
The most poetic drug. The substance. I discovered a substance found in an anti-inflammatory drug, Tantum rosa, used to treat vaginal infections, the Candida fungus. This substance is also found in lower dosages in Tantum verde or Diflam. Tantum rosa is a mixture of benzetamine and salt, NaCl. I dissolved it in water, 25 milliliters per pack, and filtered it in a paper towel in order to get rid of the dissolved salt. I swallowed the paper towel that contained the substance. I took 3 packs of Tantum rosa, 450 milligrams. The experience. After the ingestion, benzetamine has an anesthetic effect on the tongue of 3 packs of Tantum rosa, as described above. At home, I waited less than an hour and the effects appeared. Bizarre sensations circulated throughout the body, and I had closed-eye hallucinations. Also, a state of high, feeling of mental energy instilled. I felt I was activated, full of energy, but not the kind of energy that needs to be exteriorized that makes me run, but mental energy, a contemplative energy. I couldn't concentrate on reading something. I desired something new every second without being bored. Also, a very intense flux of thoughts and intuitions through my mind, the delirium effect. It was night, and I noticed that the bright lights of windows and light bulbs outside had a very intense color accompanied with a strange feeling of unfamiliarity, like I saw them the first time. I felt the need to contemplate these lights. There is a video on YouTube, Dave Gahan, Kingdom, depicts what I saw, a feeling of joy, adventure, and fun from contemplation of the night. After an hour, I decided to sleep, but I couldn't, so I waited for the feeling to get more intense. And it did after 2 hours, 4 hours since ingestion. The sensations that swept through the body were pulsating and getting more intense. I noticed I can control them and felt that I can localize my thought in the brain. These sensations felt like my hands were getting bigger and bigger, and that someone else's soul or consciousness or whatever is entering under my hands. That my hands were not mine, but someone else's. I could feel them, but in a very strange way. Also, if I controlled these sensations through my spine, through the brain, I could feel a very intense and subtle euphoria, like I could mobilize or stir the substance in my body, a sensation very similar to DXM. Everything, the time itself, was very viscous and felt like moving in slow motion. Or I didn't understand this process because the music played faster. Also, a dissociative effect appeared, similar to that of DXM, but more poetic, contemplative. I looked in the mirror and felt like in the mirror was someone else. I felt separated from my body, like I could just leave it. I moved my phone with the display on the dark and could see, not feel like seeing, 3 seconds, the trail of light persisting. True hallucinations. After an hour, I noticed that in my room was a butterfly flying and leaving trails of captions in the air. I actually believed there was a butterfly in my room. I began to see little insects that appeared and disappeared on the ceiling. Hallucinations and persistence of vision need a contrast or low light to be seen, and come after a dosage of at least 300 milligrams of benzetamine. When the next day came, I could still see little insects on the ceiling. After 12 hours, and what were like faint pink jelly things that moved on the ceiling like in the movie Flubber. The sensations and feeling of high persisted for another 10 hours, and after 2 months, the persistence of vision is still faintly present.